As we approach Christmas in 2020, I think most of us are glad that this year is almost over. However, with all the things that happened this year, there was one really good thing that I never would have expected. At the beginning of the year, when movie theaters were still open, there was a Hollywood movie premiere in Miami County, Ohio, where I live. It starred some pretty big names like Samuel L. Jackson and Christopher Plummer. He's the guy who played Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music. Peter Fonda also had a major part in the movie, and that was Fonda's last movie performance before he died. I have to tell you, when I heard that a movie was going to open at the Cinemark Theater in Piqua, Ohio, I had pretty low expectations for it. And that's not just because Piqua and the town where I live have been rivals for over 200 years. Piqua is a nice, small, Midwestern city with a lot going for it. But it's not the kind of place that you would expect a Hollywood movie to premiere. So I figured that the movie must be some low-budget movie or maybe a documentary. A documentary would make sense because it was about a war hero from Piqua named Bill Pitsenbarger who received the Medal of Honor and was killed in Operation Abilene in the Vietnam War. However, it turned out to be a dramatic movie with great actors and a powerful story. It was a story so powerful that I had to struggle to control my emotions when I watched the movie. I don't mean I started to tear up. I mean that there were times in the movie when I thought I was going to break down and start sobbing. You see, the movie isn't just about the battle in 1966 when Bill Pitsenbarger died rescuing men in battle. It was also about what happened 30 years later when those same men were dealing with awful stuff that happened that day and how they were rescued again. The most surprising thing of all was that in all that pain, I could see the gospel. My wife and I live in Troy, Ohio, which is about 10 miles south of the city of Piqua, but we have a lot of connections to the town. Both of us have worked at jobs there, and we both serve two small churches in Piqua on a part-time basis. She is a church musician at one church, and I preach at another. In fact, every time I do, I drive right past Bill Pitsenbarger Park where there is a statue of Pitts standing at the entrance. There are people at those churches who knew Bill Pitsenbarger and went to school with him. So I decided I had to deliver a message that explored how a movie about a war hero was also about the gospel. As Christmas approaches, I think that message is extremely relevant right now, so I'd like to share part of it with you. This message starts with the script from a scene in the movie. The scene begins with Scott Huffman and Tom Tully standing in front of the Vietnam War Memorial having an intense conversation. Tully: "I went to clean him up, you know, me and another guy. I wanted him to look good for his mom and dad. The whole time I'm washing him, his hands, his feet, I didn't feel anything, nothing. That's when I knew that I had been over there too long. So I shipped him off, finished my tour, and got on with my life." Tully leans down and lays a small wreath under the names of the fallen of Operation Abilene. Huffman: "Did you?" Tully: "Did I what?" Huffman: "Get on with your life." Tully: "I'm still here." Huffman: "What happened to you on April 11th, 1966? Tully: "My friend died." Huffman: "What happened to you?" Tully: "I told you." Huffman: "It's okay." Tully: "It's not okay. None of it was okay." Huffman: "Just tell me, what was it? What happened?" Tully: "Pitts died. He was killed, shot in the head. It was war." Huffman: "How long are you going to punish yourself?" Tully: "Punish myself?" Huffman: what was the thing you did? Tully, what I did? Huffman, right, what did you do? Tully, just stop it, will you? Huffman, it's okay to talk about it. Tully, stop! Huffman, just say it. Tully, say what? He knew it was dangerous. I told him to be blankety blank careful, and then... Huffman, what? No, I'm not going to do this. Huffman, doing what? Tully turns to the wall to Pitsenbarger's name. Tully, I told him to come back up, to get back on the wire, get back on the ship, but he didn't. Why didn't he get back on the ship? Huffman, he couldn't. People needed him. Tully, yeah, well, blankety blank you. Tully surrenders to emotions, falling to his knees, crying. Huffman kneels next to him. Huffman, God, it hurt to be angry with him. Tully, yeah. Huffman, what else happened? What happened to you? Tully, I stayed on the bird. I didn't go down. I was relieved. I stayed where it was safe. When I found him, I was glad. It wasn't me, because I didn't want to be dead. I was alive, and that felt good. Huffman, so you did feel something. Tully, I felt ashamed. Huffman, you're no coward, Tom. You're a hero. Deal with that. Tully rises, searching Huffman for sincerity, eyes wet. He takes a deep breath. Huffman continued, that's a hell of a thing you've been humping for 32 years. You just needed to tell somebody. Let me take it for a while. I've got you. Tully, you want to know what I want? Huffman, I do. Tully, I want some grace, some serenity. At that point in the movie, I was overcome with emotion, and it was all I could do to hold back sobs. After all, isn't that what we all want? Some grace? Isn't that what God gives us? The movie, The Last Full Measure, was about our congregation's neighbor, friend, and classmate. It was about Bill Pitsenbarger, a United States Air Force pararescueman who risked his life hundreds of times to rescue wounded soldiers during the Vietnam War. On April 11, 1966, one of the bloodiest days of the war, Pitsenbarger went far beyond the call of duty to save over 60 wounded men, and that cost him his own life. However, The Last Full Measure is not just about Pitts. It is also about the men whom he saved, and the men who worked to get Pitts the Medal of Honor, which he deserved, but didn't get until 30 years later. Tom Tully, the soldier in the dialogue I read, served with Pitsenbarger in the Air Force Pararescue, and he was the man who initiated the reopening of Pitsenbarger's Medal of Honor recommendation. Scott Huffman, the other man in the dialogue, was the bureaucrat at the Pentagon who led the investigation for the Medal of Honor recommendation. When Tully went to meet him, Huffman didn't want to bother to even talk to him, but the Secretary of the Air Force ordered him to do the investigation. At first, Huffman didn't want to do it because it was just an unnecessary detour in his career. However, he ended up sacrificing his career to get Pitsenbarger the Medal of Honor, which he deserved. I think Huffman also did it to redeem the men whom he met during the investigation. As part of the investigation, Huffman talked to several men whom Pitsenbarger rescued. Those men were terribly and incredibly wounded by their war experience. Henry Fonda played the role of one of those men who was so wounded emotionally that day that he never slept at night, and he lived like a madman. Those men were tormented by memories of the war and racked with guilt. As I watched the movie, I was very moved by their stories. In fact, I kept asking myself, how can the gospel help those men? However, I eventually realized that the gospel was in their story. Take Dakota, played by Samuel L. Jackson, for example. He was the commander of the unit with the wounded men whom Bill Pitsenbarger rescued. However, when Scott Huffman went to talk to him about what happened that day, Dakota refused to cooperate. He even grabbed Huffman's little tape recorder and threw it in the river. Eventually, however, he went to Huffman and told his story, although it turned out to be more like a confession than a story. You see, it was Dakota's mistake that caused Bill Pitsenbarger to be killed. In the battle on April 11, 1966, Operation Abilene, Dakota's unit walked into an ambush, and they were pinned down by the enemy and taking heavy fire. So he called the artillery to help by firing on the enemy, who was very close to his unit. However, Dakota made a mistake in his instructions, so the artillery shells landed on his own men, killing some and wounding others, including their medical corpsmen. It was because of those wounded that Pitsenbarger's helicopter rescue unit went to the battle. When Pitsenbarger saw that the first man hauled up the wire in the gurney to the helicopter was the medic, he knew that the wounded on the ground would probably die unless a medic helped them. So he went down to save them. If he had not done that, 60 more men might have died that day. However, if Dakota hadn't made a mistake, there wouldn't have been a need for Pitsenbarger to be a hero, and he would not have been killed. That was a terrible burden for Dakota to carry, but it was even worse than that. Dakota was eventually wounded some distance away from the other men, and he couldn't get back to safety. Pitsenbarger risked his own life again to rescue Dakota by carrying him back to safety during the heat of the battle. Dakota had been living with the terrible guilt that it was his mistake that caused Pitsenbarger to be killed, and it was because of Pitsenbarger's heroism that Dakota was still alive. On one hand, Pitsenbarger's heroism saved Dakota, and on the other hand, it condemned him. For over 30 years, Dakota carried that unbearable burden, and he was angry at Bill Pitsenbarger for rescuing him. It was only after he accepted what happened that Dakota could talk to Huffman about it and let it go. That's when Huffman absolved him by saying, "It's okay to be a survivor." In a very significant way, the gospel is like that. We have life because Jesus Christ came down to earth and died to rescue us. However, by doing that, Jesus also makes a statement that on our own, we are dead in our sins. We cannot save ourselves. We need someone to rescue us. Our repentance, turning from sin to faith and life to death, starts when we realize that we are broken and we need someone to rescue us. All we can do is accept that. We cannot overcome death on our own, and believe that Jesus Christ has done that for us. However, that is not something that we do. It is something that God does to us and for us through His Word. There were several times during the last full measure when people talked about seeing Bill Pitsenbarger coming down the wire from the helicopter to save them. The character, played by Peter Fonda, even said that seeing Pitts come down the cable was like seeing an angel coming down. Those people whom Bill Pitsenbarger saved did not ask him to come down to rescue him. They didn't even have a choice in the matter. It's the same way for us. No one asked Jesus to come down from heaven to rescue us. In fact, people objected to it so much that they crucified him. Jesus Christ didn't come down on a helicopter wire wearing combat fatigues. He came down as a helpless infant, born to parents so powerless, the only place they could get for Mary to have the baby was in a barn with animals. Jesus Christ came to a messed up and dangerous world, just like ours today. Jesus knew that eventually he would die a terrible death, but he came anyway. He came because he loves you enough to rescue you. I hope that blesses you this Christmas.